I'm going to go ahead and take roll. We have 4 committee members. Greg Davis is here. John Knox.
Here.
Patricia Yeager.
Here.
Antoine Stevens. Antoine Stevens.
Here.
Okay. So we have a quorum. All the committee members are present. Do I have a motion to amend or adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Antoine?
Can you guys hear me?
I do. When you ask the question, I can. It's just
Okay,
when we,
I'm speaking, but I'm not sure why.
okay. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? At our last meeting, we had Spencer Fry with us, and we just had a conversation on the budget or the changing budget that we were expecting or being told to expect based on the significant trimming on the part of the state. I think the discussion was around 14%. And so we were having that discussion with we invited all our state representatives that represent Clarke County, our 2 state senators, Senator Ginn and Senator Williams. Am I right with that? Yeah, just Ginn and Calzert. God, it was Williams' first name, Calzert. And then our representatives, our 3 state representatives, Marcus Wehauer and Houston Gaines, but only Spencer Fry was able to make it. Okay, so is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the April 6th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Actually, they're the May. I think that the wording is incorrect.
Okay.
But the minutes being displayed on the agenda, it says April 6th, but it's the May 19th.
Yeah.
Minutes. I'm sorry about that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Now we're going to go into our, the old business. We talked about our joint Board of Education and Commission meeting. That was part of the old business, as well as the legislative agenda updates. So we're gonna back up a minute, and it does tie into 5.1, I think, as well. But we've got Mayor Gertz, are you on the line?
I'm here. How's it going,
Okay,
Greg?
fantastic. Fantastic. In fact, we probably need to make sure, is there anyone that doesn't know anybody on here? I'm having trouble seeing. Now I see everybody. Oh, Dr. Thomas is with us.
Yes.
Welcome, Dr. Thomas.
Yes, sir. I've been here. I was a couple of minutes late. I didn't get the link, but yes, I've been here. I've listened. I heard you amend. I heard you read the minutes. We're good.
Okay, great. Super. And we've got Mike Pruitt with us, our attorney. And of course, our fabulous Lawrence Harris, the one and only. You can say that about young people, and they like it. Is there anyone else that I'm neglecting? We may have someone out there listening, but is there anyone else that's actually attending the meeting? I don't think so.
Ms. Tillman is
Oh,
here.
Ms. Tillman
Yeah,
is. I'm sorry, Ms. Tillman, you dropped off the screen here. Let me click on you. Yes, I do see you. I see your picture. And that's great. And we thank you for all your efforts. Kelly, I know that there's been some discussion between you and Lawrence, and I think you and I have had a short discussion also. What is your, since the county is hosting our third joint Board of Education and Commission meeting, and we've tentatively kind of put a hold date somewhere in August, mainly because the first one was in August. And the last one we had was in February, but we kind of put it in your court to see if how you envision it, both who, what, when, where, all that stuff, and how.
Sure. I'd be glad to talk about that a little bit, Greg. Just as a way of introduction, I really appreciate you having me over here to this digital space this afternoon. I think those last couple of meetings we've had, the one last August and the one early this calendar year, were both very successful. And I certainly intend to continue that partnership, given so much common ground that we're working on all the time around education, kind of small e-education broadly, and community health. And so, I mean, I think particularly our last meeting, where we were able to talk a little bit about what development patterns might be looking like in the coming years and how those were going to impact the school district, was the sort of partnership I'd like to continue to see. So I think an August timeframe works really well for everybody. We, like you, are coming to the end of our fiscal year, and Lord willing, we will have an approved budget on the 25th of this month. And then I think everybody is going to take a little bit of a well-deserved break. And so I think everybody will have their heads screwed back on by August, and that'd be a good time for a meeting. And both Greg, with you and with Lawrence Harris, there's been some conversation about how we could collaborate around broadband needs. And you know, if I think about that very broadly, you know, that's always a community need. But as we've seen in the midst of the pandemic and with digital education, or attempts at digital education in some cases, it's an ever more significant need, and one that I think we're well positioned to have a conversation around. In very loose terms, we approved a package as part of our 2020 SPLOS that went in front of the voters last November and was approved, that would fund about a $7 million plan for a community-wide broadband web. I have to be honest and say it's not everything that we ever think that the community would need around broadband. It really is like a first, or maybe even a first and a second step of what might be a 3 or 4 step process. But we have, subsequent to our SPLOST referendum, had some private sector interest in collaboration from a couple of telecoms. And I think when we've got the meeting, I believe tomorrow morning, that'll include Josh Edwards and a couple of folks from our IT department, we'll be able to describe sort of the position of that now. And then certainly by the time that the school board and the county commission could get together in August, I think we would have both a good framework around what we know we could provide right now, and then maybe even how that could be supplemented or partnered with the school district. So I think that's a great first kickoff topic. And then, I mean, I think at least a couple of years back, informally, we've had some conversations around what could after school and summer programming collaboration look like. And I think that would be another good topic if that was something that that this committee and board members wanted to recommend to the full pair of groups.
Okay, comments, questions for Kelly?
Those would be 2 of my top priorities. So that's great news. Thank you.
Antoine or John? Okay.
Nothing from my end. I'm just excited to hear that this is still on the table. So
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Kelly, you mentioned the meeting tomorrow. Is that among your staff?
Yeah, that's a staff level meeting, and I'll sort of be there as an eavesdropper, I guess. just so that Athens Clarke County staff can describe what we already know about what we can do around broadband access for the community. And then I think there will even be some new information that I haven't been privy to yet around any private partnership offerings that have come. Like I said, a couple of telecoms have contacted us. You know, generally what happens when something on the nuts and bolts level hits my office, if it's beyond my skill set as broadband is, I bounce that to somebody in the department and say, you guys talk. And then when you have some clarity around, you know, what might be either a policy step or an additional funding step, come back to me and put something on the table.
Kelly, that meeting with your team is before we all meet tomorrow afternoon.
I believe that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, let me, I just got a new phone, and as of like 11 o'clock, I have my Outlook stuff on my phone again. I can tell you when that is.
Yay. And it's not a big deal. I was just thinking it would be helpful maybe if might have information that could help guide our 11 o'clock conversation.
Yep, 11 o'clock.
Okay.
And so
Is
I see Lawrence, Dr. Thomas is on that, Josh Edwards, one of our 2 assistant managers, and Travis Cooper in our IT unit.
Oh, great. I'm glad that's taken place. So that's at 11 o'clock tomorrow.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep, that's
that-
all of us with Mayor Gertz and his team. Mr.
Okay.
And my understanding is that that will be just sort of the high level overview of where we are at this point in time. And, you know, given that we've got 6 weeks or more between the full body meetings, I think we'd be able to refine between now and then what some school district collaboration opportunity could look like.
I don't know what the timeline is on these sorts of things. Do you think it would be something that could be in place for fall semester for the kids, or are we
Probably
looking-
not.
Yeah.
The first glance at this would have involved this, or I guess conceptually still involves this sort of 3-tower setup that involves broadband cable, fiber cable, kind of being routed between those 3 towers. So there's a lot of infrastructure work involved. So it's definitely not something that would be stood up prior to August.
Is that part of where the 7 million you talked about is
Mhm.
going?
That's right.
You know, one thing that really disturbs me when we talk about broadband in Clarke County, I'm looking at, I'm sorry, I don't know really what the name of this organization is, but it's GEISP. And it is, it's an organization that made up of cable providers and internet providers and wireless providers is the best I could figure out. It's one of their lobbying groups, and they talk about in Athens, Georgia, 100% of the population has access to broadband internet, and the average home download speed is 11.47754.
Access must mean that you're driving to church or McDonald's.
Yeah, and I have a problem with this being put out like this. And have you, I mean,
My experience is those industry trade groups, and I think that's what that is. I think that's the Georgia Enterprise of Internet Service Providers. You know, I mean, they're always extolling the virtues of their industry. That's what they do. Look at how great we are. And you know, so it doesn't surprise me that they suggest that, but I could introduce you to a lot of people on Morton Road or Double Bridges Road or Cleveland Road that would maybe argue that their internet speeds aren't at that optimal download number.
and the reason why it kind of bothers me, Kelly, is that there was a May press release from the governor's office saying that 448 Wi-Fi rangers have been supplied to 36 school districts. And of course, I do know we're not the bottom of the barrel when it comes to broadband, but you know, I feel like that maybe our state policymakers may take this trade group information and basically write us out of any of equation that they may have. And it really kind of bothers me. I'm not sure what to do about it.
I mean, it's my observation that sometimes what happens at the state or general assembly level is they paint with kind of a broad brush. So they might designate a community a rural community, or designate a community an urban community. And while Athens is an urbanized county, you know, I mean, you guys drive the streets, you work with kids, you work with families, you know that, you know, my home here on Pulaski Street where I sit is not the same as John's on the east side, or yours, or you know, a family that lives up off Highway 29. You know, I mean, things do vary pretty dramatically, you know, versus say a Fulton County where you might have just sort of more thorough infrastructure access and maybe kind of not as much of sort of diversity of neighborhood type as you have in a community this size. So, you know, I think that's definitely a challenge. I know that some of the programs require a pretty low density of population per land mass. Some of the federal and state programs work that way. So that may disadvantage a place like Athens, or, you know, I mean, similarly, you know, a Bibb County or some other places where, you know, you've got a really dense core, but then you sort of dwindle out to cow pastures 10 miles away.
Yeah,
Do we have good information about internet coverage? I mean, are there maps of who has it and who doesn't? Or do you have that data?
I think we do have that. I think that's some of what Josh and his team will have tomorrow.
And so, Mr. Harris, is that something that we're using, or Dr. Thomas, is that something we are using to assess need in the schools, or have you done that? You must have done that already to some extent in the spring.
Lawrence, do you want to speak? I know we've done a couple of things. One, we looked at the well-being study. Then we sent out the survey to families, and Mr. Harris was very diligent in working with communities and schools and their neighborhood leaders, our social workers, and other groups to deliver surveys by hand to populations who might not be as engaged with their email, looking at surveys, you know, through email, social media. So they did paper copies, and we've been getting those hand results entered. And that is also giving us data on internet access. Surprisingly, and Mr. Harris, please jump in, but I was a little surprised, even when I looked at it about 2 days ago, with the number of families who said they did have some form of internet. Like when we first were getting the survey, I felt like it was kind of skewed because it was from those families who had accessed it via their email. But I'm thinking that most of the hand written copies are in. Is that correct, Mr. Harris?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And in the surveys we've had, we've been input about 5,012 responses, including those that were hand done. So it's a really nice sample size. And about 95.1% have said yes, they have reliable internet at home to support digital learning, which to Dr. Thomas is also fairly surprised. I think, you know, some of the data, I mean, the data is what it is. I think, you know, we're out there helping families to take the surveys by hand, working with the neighborhood leaders. We partnered to go into the neighborhoods to just do handwritten surveys that we then input into the Google form. One thing that my office is also working on was this upcoming fall. We've been working with Dr. Grace Bagwell Adams to look at the Athens Wellbeing Project data. Of course, there was a 2016 sample, but now that we're in 2020, of course, things can change every day, every week, every month. We were looking at, as we start the school year back this upcoming year, how can we partner with the neighborhood leaders and use our family engagement specialists to do kind of a representative sample of families as they come into school this fall. Of course, figuring out what that fall return to school is going to look like will determine how we can collect some of that information, but kind of using the staff we have, our family engagement specialists, using neighborhood leaders, and as parents and students, you know, come, we can, you know, administer surveys to make sure all of our students have access to internet. So But right now, yeah, 95.1% of the 5,012 responses were yes.
And Lawrence, let me ask you something. Are we sure that we're not mixing in folks who are using Verizon to check their email and to do searches online? That is what people are talking about when they say I have internet coverage?
That is a possibility. I mean, the survey question itself, as you know, like that, it's only as strong as the question you ask in a survey. And I know, most people have administered surveys. So the question is, do you have reliable internet access at home to support digital learning? It could be very well that students, or the families who answered are those who may be accessing it through their cell phones. I know several students who do their homework and stuff right there from their personal device, because the phone is in itself a computer. But no, it didn't get to that specifics. I mean, if you want the number, 245 individuals said no, they do not have access to the reliable internet. And then that would have been 4,767 that said yes. So, Mr. Davis, it could be those who are doing it on their cell phone. Maybe access to reliable internet could be at a community center. But the question did say at home to support digital learning. So, the survey is only as strong as the question itself on the tool.
And,
Well, I
and the
think-
only data we have to figure out where those 245 kids are is from Grace's maps from 2016. We don't actually have updated locations for those kids.
Right, because there was, I believe, from my understanding, it was supposed to be a 2018 kind of update, and
Yeah.
it didn't happen. So that's what we thought, if we could partner with the neighborhood leaders and then use our family engagement specialists, we maybe to get more neighborhood data, and then we can maybe work with maybe Jerry Shannon or someone at UGA to help make some population density maps so we could visually see where the need is. So yeah, we've definitely been working on this, because to y'all's point, it's very important that our kids and families have access to internet to access digital learning. Without reliable internet, they won't be able to log on.
My thing is that I really think that, and this goes for whatever information Kelly, his group pulls together, I think we really need, from an educational standpoint, really tease out those who are relying on their phone versus those who are actually are able to utilize the tremendous amount of contribution that the school district has done in putting electronic devices in the hands of our students. And I really think that we need to, next go around or whatever, I really think we need to be very careful. I know that some of these kids are, to me, I can certainly do searches with my phone. And I can compose text without just a few minor errors and very few obscenities by mistake. But in terms of actually, writing a term paper, I have heard that I've heard one kid tell me I wrote a term paper on the phone, and I get that. I just don't think it's what we need to go with and sleep good at night. So I'm really concerned about that. Plus, of course, the cell phone tends to be more expensive, particularly if we're able to negotiate, which I know that that certainly the mayor and commission would love to negotiate with these cable companies to give strong signals for low cost to the homes in the county. So I guess, Lawrence, I wouldn't. I mean those numbers are fabulous. I'm they are a little bit troublesome to me, though.
And I will add, Mr. Davis, I think, you do bring up a very salient point. So, and I'm not going to go through the whole survey, but one of the questions did ask about the availability of personal devices at home. And that response actually was a bit different than the internet response. So, of those the 5,002 people who were asked about personal devices being available for student use, or for specific student use, 82.1% said yes. And then there was 17.9% who said no, which is about almost 900 people. So, to your point, maybe those are the and then this is just an assumption, that could be those that you're saying may not have access to, may not be using a personal device like a laptop, but maybe using a cell phone, maybe using a parent's or a family member's device. So I mean, we could definitely try to drill a little bit deeper into the data. And if we decide to do a future survey closer towards the school year, determine, what is a true access? Is it on a cell phone? Is it on a laptop? Are you using an iPad? We didn't ask it that specifically in this survey, but it could be a future, just a future process. And this is another tool we just need to develop to get the information.
And there's something else too, is that, if we're going to be spending, and I don't know if Kelly knows this, but we're going to be spending $1 million, our academic department on, well, at least it's been budgeted up to $1 million on platforms, or a platform or multiple platforms in which our students can engage with the curriculum. And that can also have a big impact. And so anybody else have any concerns or questions about that?
So my other question, I guess, is, while Kelly's with us, is to think about the tower coverage versus the broadband coverage, because I understand that we bought hotspots for some of the neighborhoods or for some of the communities, but the hotspots won't work if we don't have towers. And again, with August in mind, I know you said the broadband cabling and things won't be done by then, of course, but what about any towers, additional towers that might be going up?
No, we don't anticipate any expenditures from this because this is a new SPLOST package for us. We haven't done the sequencing yet. So
Okay.
one of the things that we always have to do at the beginning of a SPLOST program is determine, which things are going to happen in 2021, which things in 2022, or in some cases, in what stages over a series of years. But we haven't done that exercise yet.
Okay.
Lawrence.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I come to think, I was asking you, or our, and this may be something we just have to research, but, and Dr. Thomas, you may know this, but presumably, if a child takes an iPad, one of the Clarke County School District iPads home, it's how would that, can that device go through Verizon to pick up the Clarke County School District server, or would it go through Comcast or AT&T, DSL, or something like that?
Oh, you're muted, Dr. Thomas.
My thought would be that generally when you're into the internet with your device, it is with a home internet provider, not a cellular provider, but you can pull into, which is the more expensive option. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but when you start looking at Verizon or AT&T or any of those other Sprint, you can use your device through your cell phone with your hotspot if you have one available on your cell phone. But of course, there's only limited, in most cases, limited data access for utilizing that hotspot. And I don't think that all phones have a hotspot on them, because I have a hotspot on my personal phone, but there isn't one on my work phone for some reason, which is not always beneficial. But and of course that is more costly. Now I could be wrong, but I thought that's how that worked in terms of accessing wireless.
Yeah, I thought it was an extra charge to it.
So
Anyway,
I have a couple iPads, and both of them, when I need to travel, I buy monthly internet access through the cellular plans. So you can buy a monthly cellular plan for your iPads if you have an iPad. At least, well, one is really old, so I know you can do it even for the old ones. But that, you're right, that's expensive compared to other options usually.
So Kelly and Dr. Thomas, it seems like that when y'all start meeting on, I mean, hopefully we're just kind of giving y'all ideas about maybe how things need to be discussed. Because I mean, in terms of these subjects, because because we're also obviously concerned about speed is going to be a factor for our students, as well as the coverage, as well as type of coverage. And the last piece I just want to put in there, I'm not sure. It sounds like when I even say it, it sounds cost prohibitive, but I'm you know, and I know we all have the same concern, is that we can have all the hardware there, we can have all the connections there, but if households don't have if they need technical expertise to make everything work within their four walls, who do they call? Who do they contact? And I say this, and I'm going to keep saying this story, because I think we heard Charles Worthy participate in a lot of meetings that we could not hear what he said, and it was only when he contacted the Clarke County School District and they were able to set him up properly, so now we can hear him. And if one of our leaders in the community had such hard time doing it within his house to get this functioning, I just don't know what, you know, someone that lives in a small trailer with 2 or 3 brothers and sisters, and you know, and working parents, how they, if they can't make all the pieces work, what exactly happens to those children. So that's all I'm going to say about it. It's just something that because we're talking anyway. I just throw that out there.
You're right, Mr. Davis. I think that's something we have to consider. The bright spot for me is that many of the children that we're talking about are digital natives.
Right.
Those in our generation, and they are frequently the ones who are able to help us navigate and figure out a lot of the things that we in the current, in our generation and older, struggle with. And I mean, you're right, I'm not minimizing it, but I will say that these kids have been taught a lot of digital skills, and they actually seem to be resources for their parents and grandparents, because just as digital natives, what is a very foreign concept for us is a natural for them. And I think they learn a lot of that, fortunately, at school, how to access those things. And those are skills they are able to transfer to home.
Well, you just gave me an idea, and I just throw it out there, and then we move on. But maybe we need to develop our own high school geek squad, and you know, have it as kind of an after-school project of some sort, where there would be a number that families could call in and say, "I can't get this thing to work." So just throw that out there.
Sounds like a service learning high school class for me, Greg.
I was going to say, my kid will sign up for that one, I'm sure.
And that may be the way of doing it.
Good idea.
Okay, the next, if unless there's any more discussion on 4.1, Joint Board of Education, and we are, Kelly, if you have to go, you can certainly go. We're going to schedule back. In fact, if you need to go, we may, I may call on Lawrence to. Lawrence, have we covered 5.1 in the agenda, or?
I missed the discussion we just had. Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of covers both 4.1 and 5.1.
I get to go off to an exciting agenda setting meeting. So
Okay.
y'all have a good one.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Kelly, for joining us. Have a good day.
Mr. Davis, for 4.1, then we're going to get together, you and I, to talk about how to schedule the meeting for August, since that would essentially be the month after next.
Well, that's actually in kind of Kelly's department. So I'm sure, you know, you working with the mayor and you know, and I don't want to be a third wheel, but I would be, you know, more than I would like to participate too. But I think it's really in their court. He's apparently accepted our agenda items, and so I think it's just we need to get it fleshed out on the part of what, you know, they're actually in charge of making the agenda. To make a long story short, that's what happened. The first meeting, they made the agenda, and then the second meeting, of course, you know, you played the pivot role in making the agenda for the February meeting, and so now it's kind of back in their court. So, but he's committed to doing it in August, taking a breather in July. So presumably, and we've already selected the topics. So I think, Lawrence, what would be appropriate is we can start thinking about, and you know, maybe you talking to Dr. Thomas or whatever, who to bring in onto the table from the school district. If we're talking about broadband internet service in the county for students and families and residents. And then the second topic, after school and summer programming, leisure services, Clarke County School District, and kind of what that looks like. And so, so with those two topics in mind, then of course they will bring their folks to the table, and we will have ours. And by the time everything is said and done, we probably want to make sure that both sides are on the agenda like we did. I think we did that in February. Didn't we include some of their, I don't know if I think we wanted to do that, and I'm not sure we actually had their names attached to agenda items. Did we, Lawrence?
We collaborated on the agenda, but that was some of the feedback we got, was that it would be really good that next time that we work a little bit more closer on the items we're presenting on, so that way we already align the information before presenting, so we can work on that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you're in the best spot to do that because you know the staff on our end, and you work with them daily. So, and we just pair up with what the county is doing. So, you know, I feel good about that. Dr. Thomas, you have any concerns?
Sorry, I keep trying to mute so that you don't have any feedback. No, I'm good with that. I think the way that the agenda was set for our last meeting was helpful. And it allowed us to discuss needs from both entities, so.
Okay. But the next item, and I don't know if you know, John or Tish, if have you, I have not heard anything about the legislature since they started meeting yesterday. So I don't know if y'all picked up anything, Lawrence, Dr. Thomas. So,
Yeah, just they have to get their budget done, and that's their top priority at the moment. So
Right, that's what I.
I think also the hate crimes bill is going to have to be passed on too. Even Senator Calzett there was an article with him saying that has to be done. It has to be stiffened. So presumably we'll at least get some hate crime legislation out of the session. I would love to have the broadband stuff out there too, but I think that would be wishing too much. Any other questions, concerns that we want to talk today, committee members? Antoine? John? Tish?
I was just going to follow up in terms of community relations. I'm getting a lot of questions from people in the community, whether they're at UGA or not at UGA, about the timing and the plans for fall. There's a lot of confusion about who's on the committee and who's not on the committee. And I know there's been some communications with the community, but in terms of relationships with UGA and other things, it feels like we need to do a little more communication about what's happening with the fall. Are there any updates? Is there a plan for an update? Are we looking at kind of giving out more information this week, next week, or waiting until end of July? What's the timeline like? Because I am getting lots of questions about, well, are they going to match what UGA is doing? Are they not going to match? What do I do with my kids if I have to go back to work? Or it's just this lot of people trying to plan, and I know we don't have a plan completely yet, but the timing of when we're going to have a plan might be helpful.
Mr. Harris, do you want to speak? We have a committee that's meeting weekly, and from that committee, there are several subcommittees. I know Mr. Gaskins and Mr. Fisher were the co-chairs, and Mr. Harris, please correct me. I think Mr. Harris and now Amy Rourke, our lead nurse, are kind of the team of 4 leading that work. When we met today, we had a cabinet meeting and met today, and Mr. Gaskins said there was a goal of 1 set of information to have out by the end of this week, and additional information by the next week. And I had actually shared with someone last night that it may be helpful if we started doing like 2-week updates or weekly updates now to let people know. But the idea of kind of just giving people a timeline is something we can do.
I think that would help some of the stress and strain on the community in terms of what's going to happen with their kids and whether they need to start planning for options. I mean, like what I've been doing is just even sending them the DOE, the Georgia DOE site that has the different scenarios, and they've been thrilled to see that. I don't know if that's anything related to what we're doing, but at least I'm showing them that, and they're sort of happy about that. But that level is even useful.
Right.
Good point. Trish, good point. Any other comments or questions, topics? Okay, well, we've got at least those of us who can. We have a community budget meeting coming up at 5:30, and followed by a millage rate meeting at 6. So if there's a move to adjourn, we'll entertain it.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, speak by saying aye.
Bye.
Bye.
Antoine, you with us?
Yeah, he said it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see some of you in 10 minutes.
I was about to say a wonderful 10 minutes. See you all.
Yep.
shortly.
See you guys there.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.